Online live stage at Microsoft Ignite. I'm Rick Claus, and I'm joined by two very important people, VIPs, I like to say. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks. Thanks for having us on.
We have Jeffrey Stover over on the side, father of PowerShell, among other things, talking about things like NanoServer and other things like that. Woohoo! And then we also have Mr. Mark Russinovich. And I do have to comment, you're both wearing, Matt, did you call each other to coordinate what you were going to wear today?
So in our session, we did a joint part. We went backstage and to let Jeremy do his part.
Yep.
15 minutes passed. To me, it felt like 30 seconds, and I came out wearing this.
Transformed man.
A black hood went over top of his head, and
no
then
idea
woke up and he had a new shirt on.
It's Bengali.
Well, we carried the session live during the stream here for the people that joined us at Microsoft Ignite website and also Channel 9 Live as well. Tell us a little bit about the session that you guys did. Like, how did you come up with the flow and how you're going to deliver that particular session?
Yeah, so really we started talking, the whole story is around the Azure Stack.
Right.
And the Azure Stack is really where we take a bunch of the technology and lessons from Azure and bring it on, make it available to customers so that they can run it on premises or that service providers can run. And so we really started to, kind of go back of the history and say, how did we get here? Oh yeah, you had these problems with the computer. Remember, you did this and you did that. And so then he would start off talking about the problems that they had, and then I would talk about how we took those either directly the code or the inspiration and the designs and then incorporated them into the Azure stack.
Very nice. From the perspective of the evolution of where that was coming from, was it mostly coming from the perspective of cloud technology?
My idea.
It was purely yours. I mean, you are the lead architect for Windows Server and System Center Next and that sort of stuff as well.
I tell Mark what to do. He takes the credit. I'm pretty noble that way, and that's why he's done well by listening to me. And
so we got to let Mark in here on this one here. So what really happened during that session?
That's the way I remember it.
What really happened?
Just humor him.
Okay. Mark, CTO of Azure, your portion of that particular one before you brought on Jeremy and disappeared with a new shirt when you came back out again. What piece did you talk about specifically that was the most interesting to you today?
Actually, so the most interesting to me is probably one of the most impactful changes to the platform, and that's the Azure Resource Manager.
Right.
And which is a high-level cloud application model, one where you're not looking at discrete resources, but one where you're tying them together.
Right.
With the power of templates, a kind of declarative, goal state-driven approach, something that Jeffrey borrowed for desired state configuration.
Oh, is that where it came from?
Yeah.
That's, okay, I got that now.
This is part of the cloud inspiring the on-prem work. But really, the power of templates for unlocking agility, for repetitive, which kind of predictable deployments of applications into different environments in a parameterized way is, I think, going to transform the way that services are delivered in the cloud and really create this center of gravity for an ecosystem, both in on-prem clouds as well as the Azure public cloud, for partners to be able to deliver essentially application appliances that are modern, consists of PaaS resources like database and storage and machine learning and Hadoop, data analytics, all together as one holistic application.
Now, you kind of jokingly referred to how the declarative template is borrowed by DSC to be able to do the stuff on the PowerShell DSC side of things. Obviously, I'm assuming with the Azure Stack piece, it's going to be doing a lot of behind-the-scenes configuration and deployment as required, using things like DSC on premises, right?
Yeah, that's right, exactly right. So basically, it turns out that when you hear the elevator stories for both the Azure, the ARM, and then desired state configuration, they sound very similar. So people think, oh, is there some conflict? Or when do I use one versus when do I use the other? The fact of the matter is that Mark and I have been coordinating our designs on these for many, many years. And so what happens is that the stuff Mark's been working on is a cloud model. And at some point in your cloud model, you might have a VM. It might be that you're just configuring services and that, but then at some point you want to have a virtual machine, and if you want to configure that virtual machine, then you put a desired state configuration document in there. So it's kind of a hierarchical model.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with the ARM model, being in its templates, the JSON templates, so you can go off and you can modify them. I liken it to being able to go off, how I go off and do a lot of my PowerShell stuff, is I go off and I'll find someone else that's done a script or done some stuff that I can learn from. And then if I like that, but doesn't quite meet my needs, I can then just simply pull that down, go off and make some changes to it, and then now that I'm doing the stuff on the ARM side of things, I simply go in and push that back up into Git to be able to go off and share my changes back out again.
Yep.
Same thing applies to be able to go off and modify it, but it's also not just to Windows-based devices too. I mean, this can work at anything, correct?
It's absolutely true. In fact, you can have ARM templates that have no compute in them at all.
True, yes.
So we're just talking about Windows and Linux as the compute hosting environment for some of these resources like containers or virtual machines or extensions that you configure with DSC. But that's the whole point of this model, is that it's designed to be completely extensible and pluggable for whatever kind of resource types that you imagine you want as part of a cloud application. The one that I use as an example just to reinforce this fact that cloud resource is whatever you imagine it to be, is SendGrid email endpoint.
Okay, yes.
So you can create a template. If you provision SendGrid into your subscription, now you can create templates that, for example, you got an application that is front end with middle tier. Middle tier needs to send emails based on something.
Right.
And so how do you today set up something like that to send email? Well, you go create your SendGrid account.
I was about to say it's a very manual process. I had to do that for my website that I have up there,
so
doing different things. It was a pain to remember what what my API key was, to be able to go off and access it and securely have access to it as well.
And so every time you deploy that application, you'd have to go do that same out-of-band step. But now that it's a resource type, you can have a template that says front end stands up, middle tier stands up, SendGrid endpoint stands up. Configuration for that's automatically plumbed into the middle tier. One-click deploy. Specifying some parameterizations like where I want it deployed and what the name of the website is, and you're off and running.
Happy days.
I was about to say, we do have the ability to take in some questions in case anyone happens to be out there and is interested in asking either Mark or Jeffrey any questions. If you're at channel9.msdn.com, there is a form at the bottom that you can go off and fill out and ask a couple of questions. Or if you wanted to, you can also reach out and talk to us on the Twitters with the hashtag MSIgniteCH9, and we'll be able to get some questions out to you there. Now, you guys have a number of sessions coming up in the very near future for the rest of the week, because you're very, very busy guys. Do you want to call out one of the sessions you're going to be talking about that's, you're, again, rather excited that you're going to be delivering for your particular topic?
I'm just thrilled about NanoServer, of course.
I figured you were going to say Nano. It's either going to be PowerShell, DSC, or Nano, whenever you talk to Mr. Snover.
Well, all the important stuff. You nailed it. Yeah, so NanoServer is by far the most exciting thing. It's the most important, most significant change we've made to Windows Server since NT. So for people who don't have it in focus, Server Core, really, really small. This is like 20 times smaller than Server Core. And so it's a version of Server that's optimized for the cloud, Cloud OS infrastructure, and born in the cloud application that really delivers on small footprint, low resource utilization, great security, low serviceability. And so I've got two sessions. We've got NanoServer, the foundation of the future of something.
We're not going to hold you on the actual title, what it is.
Anyway, NanoServer, the future of Windows Server.
Right.
Because I talk about how it starts off with those scenarios in version 1.
Right.
But then in the future, all the server scenarios are going to be refactored to run on NanoServer. And then the second is managing NanoServer. NanoServer is a fully headless environment. There's no local login. None. Zero. No RDP. Happy guys out there.
They like that. No login. That's great.
So that means you have to do everything remotely. So we'll show you some improvements that we made to remote management so that you can manage NanoServer. So that's the most exciting thing.
Nice. How about you, Mark, if you had to pick one?
Well, I'm doing a joint session with Mark Manassi that we did at TechEd
I remember that,
Europe and TechEd US last year. We started
it. It's a crowd pleaser.
Yeah.
We let Mark back in the conference again?
That's right.
I thought he was barred because of that session. Wasn't he? The fist fight broke out or something on stage?
Not that I remember.
So Mark Manassi.
So it's me and Mark Manassi. We're going to have a dialogue. Him representing the customer, the IT pro audience, and me representing Azure and the cloud, and us talking about the challenges that IT is facing and some of the things they could do to get ready for the cloud, where they can start experimenting with the cloud, addressing concerns like security. So we go through a whole bunch of different topics that we know that they're very interested in. And like I said, it's been really successful the past couple. So continue to run it. People like it.
Jeffrey isn't going to be making a guest appearance on that one to give him a PowerShell T-shirt as well, is he? You don't.
Isn't it?
Never
don't
know.
put any ideas in it.
You are the brains. Check out the big brain on Brad.
It might be. Again, if you'd like to ask a couple of questions, you're more than welcome to with the channelline.msdn.com site up here once again with CTO of Azure, Mr. Mark Rusinovich. I almost called you Mark Manassi. I'm sorry, Mark Rusinovich. And the lead architect for Windows Server and System Center and vNext, Mr. Snover. How about some things that you've heard customers saying so far? Have you had a chance to interact with some of the people here at the crowd after your session? I know normally you get inundated with people rushing down to the front to ask you questions and to talk about some stuff. Anything that pop up that was kind of interesting that came out of your session?
Yeah, so I've got a lot of people coming up to me asking me about desired state configuration.
Right.
It's sort of shocking how quickly people have picked that up and are using it, and then are asking, oh, when, how does it integrate with other products like Chef and Aditi and Guardrail? How do you set up a pull server? I'm just sort of shocked at how many people are actually deploying desired state configuration today. So there's that, and then a ton of excitement about Nano Server. Hey, what about this role? What about that role? So actually the most requested role I heard just in the last 2 hours has been around Active Directory.
Oh, yeah?
And so the way we think about this is we're going to focus in on the two scenarios I mentioned, and then over time we'll take a look at the other roles based upon do they benefit where there's a lot of them, so size. So things imagine like software load balancer. You probably want to have a lot of those. So that's a great candidate. Or areas where they particularly benefit from very high security. So Active Directory is a great candidate there. So those are things that we'll do after we get this first version out the door.
So for me, the thing that I heard a lot of response to, and I showed it, but we didn't call it Azure Stack last week at Build, and then it was shown again this morning in the keynote, and we talked about it in our session, and that is Azure Stack. That is taking the Azure application layer and the service delivery, the resource providers for a core set of Azure services and making that available on an on-prem environment running on System Center and Windows Server. So that template model that I talked about now is available to people.
That's going to be in the stack as well.
That's in the stack as well.
Oh, I see. I didn't know that.
You know what? I'm going to take my answer back and go with Mark's.
Yeah.
He's right. That is the thing that people really...
You can't change your answer, Jeffrey.
I'm changing.
See?
He follows you, eh? He does. He likes to tell the story that you follow him, but I think he's actually following you.
He's right. No, people really get excited about that story. A lot of people have struggled when it comes to deploying their own clouds. And they're really kind of stuck in that virtualization. We made the point that there's a big difference between virtualization and a cloud mindset, and the ability to simplify deploying a cloud. One thing to buy, one thing to acquire, one thing to deploy. We put all the pieces together, which allows the teams to then say, oh, I can depend upon that being there, and so now I can then match right up to it. So we're effectively eliminating the organization from the customer experience, putting together this, smoothing out all the seams in the experience. Yeah, that's the most exciting thing.
Now, I don't know if you call this out specifically in your session or not, or if you can't disclose this, I understand if you can't disclose it, but Nano Server being able to work inside of the Azure Stack on premises, is it going to be one of those things that's underpinning and making Azure Stack work, or is Azure Stack going to be working with a full-fledged server?
Yeah, so there's two answers to that. So first is, in the born in the cloud applications, Nano Server will be a guest VM that can run on anything. Right? Okay. Azure, Hyper-V, VMware, anything. Then there's Azure, the host. Nano Server as the host infrastructure, and there we're clustered hypervisor and clustered storage. Okay. So if you think about cloud platform solution, or cloud in a box, what is that? On all the physical devices, we only have two. Clustered hypervisor and clustered storage. Okay. So I have nothing to announce, but there's a couple dots, and no problem. Pick a pen.
I don't want to get anyone in trouble. That's for sure. That's for sure. We have kind of an interesting question here from Chrono. This one here is from Mark Rusinovich, saying basically cloud security is an area that continues to cause very much sleepless nights, cause a lot of stress in the world. How is it possible that you work in the security world, and why don't you have gray hair?
What's new?
Products.
Actually, I don't yet. I've been lucky. I think I see a few gray hairs.
Good genetics.
Jeffrey's causing me.
Good genetics.
So it's what's new in the security world. I think that we talked about some of them in the session that we just gave, which is this lockdown host. It is really the, I think, recognition that a lot of the security measures and mechanisms and technologies that people considered esoteric and too much friction 10 years ago are now becoming something that everybody realizes that we really need to really operate securely. And one of the first places that we start where whatever friction they happen to introduce, and of course we're always trying to reduce the friction, but where the friction is more than justified is in securing the infrastructures. So Jeffrey talked about some of the things today in the session for, well, there's hypervisor enforced code integrity, there's virtual machine shielding so that customer virtual machines are even shielded from the infrastructure itself in the case where you're running it on an infrastructure that you might not fully trust. So this, and then we talked about security analytics being a big part of the whole security response lifecycle and this mentality of assumed breach. That one I think is relatively new. Just in the past few years, you've started to see more and more of the industry adopt this. We got to assume we're breached, and that means that you look at the problem differently than we did 10 years ago, which was put a nice wall and moat around your soft inner sides, but then kind of focus everything on the defense. And once somebody gets in, well, okay, you're screwed at that point.
Yes, at that point, the
so
door's
you just
already
cross
wide.
your fingers and hope that doesn't happen. We've realized that we moved into a world where somebody's going to get in. No matter how strong and how much money you spend on that wall, somebody's going to find a crack in it and get through, which means that you need to worry about how do you detect somebody that's gotten in behind the wall, and how do you keep them into small a space as possible once they're in, and how do you get them out? And so security analytics is a huge part of the detection process, and that's where cloud and big data and machine learning, the intelligent cloud, as Satya says, really, we've taken advantage of that inside of Microsoft in our infrastructure, and then we're productizing that and making it available to customers. You asked what customers, what the attendees said was exciting about the keynote. When I polled the audience right before our session, and I was walking around asking people what they thought of the keynote, it was awesome, which I rarely hear about in people's response to keynote questions. Said, what did you like the best? And what I heard from 2 of the 5 people I asked was that security analytics, the ability to detect an anomalous login, to be able to look at account activity and understand what's been going on with credentials and identities and accesses to my systems, which Brad showed into the keynote demo. They thought that was great, and that's part of fleshing out that whole story.
That's awesome. We're going to have to take a break from here, from the live stage. We're going to be throwing it back to the showcase keynote area and pick it up with Joey Snow and with Alex. Take it away. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Take it away.